Good evening. I'm Robbie Alampay. The big stories tonight. His would-be predecessor might not have conceded yet, but U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has started the ball rolling with a 12-man coronavirus task force. This as COVID-19 cases in the U.S. tallied 10 million. That surge and the ballooning cases in Europe pushed the world to yet another grim milestone, 50 million infections globally. Over here, never mind the complaints filed against him for violating quarantine protocols, Metro Manila Police Chief Sinas has just been promoted as the country's top cop. His appointment draws jeers and cheers. Two motions for inhibition, one from former Senator Bongbong Marcos and another from the Office of the Solicitor General, were filed before the Supreme Court. They want Associate Justice Leonen booted out of the vice presidential poll protest. And Disney releases its Christmas ad with a Filipino twist. The 3-minute ad, which has so far garnered 6 million views, easily tugged at the heartstrings of Filipinos.
When you need direction, look to the stars. If you don't know where you're headed, follow your heart. When you're lost, I'll find you. I'm right there beside you, like a light bulb you never reach.
We begin with U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's first order of business for his incoming administration, a response to the COVID pandemic. After formally clinching victory over the weekend, Biden is set to form a coronavirus task force to determine actions to take once he assumes office in January. Biden is set to meet with a 12-member advisory board to discuss measures on how to tame the virus that has infected nearly 10 million Americans and has led to more than 230,000 deaths. He is then expected to speak in Delaware to talk about his COVID-19 strategy, including rebuilding America's economy.
I will spare no effort, none, or any commitment to turn around this pandemic.
Outgoing President Donald Trump, meanwhile, showed no signs of conceding despite falling short by at least 4 million votes. After lashing out on Twitter about a supposed fraud in the elections, Trump was seen unbothered the morning after Biden's victory, enjoying a round of golf. Trump said he is prepared to take matters to court. Celebrations over Biden's win have since erupted in several cities in the United States, the first being in Delaware, where the president-elect gave his victory speech. It was a party in the USA for thousands of Democrat supporters, most of whom were wearing masks as they welcomed a new leadership under Biden. The COMELEC says mail-in voting could boost voter turnout in the 2022 elections, just like how they did it in the United States. But how does the country have the infrastructure for this? Mailin Los Baños has this story.
Many Americans prefer the mail-in voting to the in-person option during last week's election due to the threat of COVID-19. Back home, officials are thinking of doing the same. Senator Amy Marcos has filed a bill seeking to allow mail-in voting among senior citizens, persons with disabilities, pregnant women, and indigenous people. The move, she says, will ensure that Filipinos enjoy their right to suffrage despite the COVID-19 scare. The COMELEC says the mail-in option can bump up voter turnout in 2022.
It's new, and a lot of people will want to try something new. Number two, it's a very practical solution because of COVID.
However, Jimenez fears that less than a year won't be enough to prepare. The poll body is looking at a 61 million strong electorate.
Kaya siya for a small voting public lang. No? Again, like I said, maybe focus on senior citizens. They're the most vulnerable, no? Persons with disability, again, the most vulnerable groups in terms of the COVID pandemic.
Jimenez also sees some logistical issues. One of these is the creation of a mailing list of citizens who will be provided with the ballots. Production and distribution of voting packets must also be addressed.
Senior citizens, around, let's say 500,000, about 500,000, just as a nice round figure. That's 500,000 voting packets that you're going to have to prepare. So this is a logistical challenge.
The COMELEC is also concerned about the availability of drop-off points. PhilPost says they will tap LGUs and private companies to help them install drop-off points. Apart from more than 1,000 postal offices nationwide, the agency is now preparing for the possibility of mail-in voting. Some lawmakers are not convinced. Senate President Tito Soto believes that the mail-in option is prone to cheating. Senate Minority Leader Franklin Drilon is afraid that the Philippines does not have the infrastructure to pull it off.
Do not have the infrastructure that is needed to assure our people that the voting by mail will reflect the true intent of our people.
Jimenez says the commission will still have to iron out these issues should mail-in voting push through to ensure that Filipinos will not doubt the integrity of the 2022 elections. Reporting for News 5, Mailin Los Baños, we are One News.
Despite a string of controversies that was linked to him since lockdown started, incumbent Metro Manila top cop Debol Sinas has been appointed as the next chief of the Philippine National Police. Camille Samonte with a big story.
Then Metro Manila Police Chief Debol Sinas faced criticisms after photos of his Mañanita birthday celebration in Camp Bagong Diwa circulated online. These showed a number of police officers defying health protocols despite the hard lockdown back in May. Criminal and administrative complaints were filed against Sinas and his subordinates, but President Rodrigo Duterte still took his side. Now, the president has even appointed him to be the next chief of police, replacing General Camilo Cascolan, who will retire on Tuesday. The palace said the president does not owe anyone an explanation for his choice.
It is a prerogative of the President. Nonetheless, tinignan siyempre ni Presidente ang yung track record ng kanyang appointee at matagal nang sinasabi ni Presidente na talagang si bagong PNP Chief Sinas ay napakalaki na naitulong sa kanyang war on drugs.
Sinas is also being investigated for allegedly threatening the family of a retired cop to move out of their home in Taguig back in July. These incidents, says News 5 editor-at-large Manny Mogato, have painted Sinas in a bad light.
You remember, General Sinas graduated number 7 in his class at the Philippine Military Academy in 1987. So he is known to be a hardworking soldier and police officer. But I think the Mañanita and another incident at Bagong Diwa has tainted his reputation, his personality.
Sinas was regional director of the Police Regional Office 7 prior to his appointment as NCRPO chief. He earned his second star or police major general while serving the NCRPO. By appointing Sinas, Duterte has set aside the order of succession in the police command. Sinas surpassed the incumbent second-in-command Lieutenant General Guillermo Eleazar and third-in-command General Cesar Binag.
The reporters like us are rooting for General Eleazar because we know that General Eleazar is making a good job as a taskforce field commander on the pandemic. There are rumors going around that the president really is very close to Sinas.
Eleazar believes that Sinas is qualified to be the next PNP chief and was chosen by the president because of his good performance and track record. Senator Francis Pangilinan, meanwhile, criticized Sinas' appointment, saying that administration allies involved in anomalies are being promoted instead of punished. But for former PNP chiefs and now Senators Ping Lacson and Bato de la Rosa, Sinas is a good choice for the position. Senator Win Gatchalian says Sinas' appointment is a chance for him to prove that he is fit for the job. Outgoing PNP Chief General Camilo Cascolan, meanwhile, expressed support for Sinas and urged the police to rally behind his successor's leadership. For News 5, Camille Samonte, we are One News.
The driver who escaped after an armed encounter with the Highway Patrol Group in Cavite last Friday was already taken into custody. The HPG identified the driver as Raymond Zuniga, who reportedly drove a Nissan Terra as a getaway car. HPG Chief Alexander Tagum said they noticed that the car had no plate number and no conduction sticker either. They asked for the driver to stop and show necessary documents, but Zuniaga's partner, Musesal Cedrain, allegedly stepped out of the vehicle and started firing shots. An HPG officer was then killed in the crossfire, including Cedrian himself.
We will be facing criminal cases na ipapile natin for his part during that incident. Typically, sir, one of the sir will be as an accessory to that incident na ikinamatay ng isang responding officer natin.
We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns, there is no letting up just yet in former Senator Bongbong Marcos' quest for the vice presidency. He wants a justice to inhibit from his full protest. And the country now has a vaccine roadmap. Find out which areas will be prioritized for the mass inoculation. It's coming up next. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. 4 years after the 2016 national elections, the fight for the vice presidency is still not over, at least not for former Senator Bongbong Marcos. He wants Supreme Court Justice Marvic Leonen to inhibit from his poll protest, a move backed with a similar motion from the Solicitor General. Mailin has the details.
4 years after his vice presidential electoral protest and with less than 2 years left in the current administration, former Senator Bongbong Marcos is still not giving up. Marcos personally went to the Supreme Court this morning to file an extremely urgent omnibus motion for Associate Justice Marvic Leonen to inhibit from his poll protest against Vice President Leni Robredo. He accused Leonen, the justice in charge of his poll protest, of being biased based on Leonen's dissenting opinion in the Marcoses' burial case. Leonen had stated that former President Ferdinand Marcos presided over a regime that caused untold sufferings for millions of Filipinos and that he should not be considered a hero. Marcos pointed to this bias as the reason for the delay in his poll protest.
Justice Leonen continues to sit as the justice in charge. For sure, it will be delayed. For sure. 11 months, walang ginawa, walang sinulat, walang linabas na desisyon, walang order kahit na no. For 11 months.
The camp of Vice President Leni Robredo quickly denounced Marcos's move, calling it a mind conditioning game. They said instead of attacking a Supreme Court justice, Marcos should just accept the reality that he lost in the 2016 elections. They even called Marcos a spoiled brat, reminding him that his father no longer reigns. Meanwhile, when asked about some of his known supporters' move to oust Justice Leonen through a co-warranto, Marcos distanced himself, saying he has his own legal team. Attorney Larry Gadon had asked the Supreme Court to release Justice Leonen's SAL-N, a petition which the High Court denied. A similar petition from Solicitor General Jose Calida was likewise denied.
Si Attorney Gadon, we are in touch. Nagte-text kami. Although the Soljan, we have not talked about this case. I have my own legal team. I do not need to consult with the Soljan. Besides, he's not a supporter of mine. He is the counsel for the state.
But this afternoon, Gadon sent to the media a copy of the Office of the Solicitor General's motion asking Leonen to inhibit himself from Marcos's case. Calida said his motion is based on his mandate as Tribune of the People. He adds that such move was done in the best interest of the state. He adds that the delay and inaction of Leonen in the past 11 months compelled them to act and move for Leonen's inhibition. For News 5, Mailin we are One News.
Government intends to provide 50 million doses of a potential COVID-19 vaccine for 25 million Filipinos as early as June next year. But that might mean another set of loans should funding fall short. Greg Gregorio with the details.
The country now has a COVID vaccine roadmap. Vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. said the IATF has already approved the national program, which covers the evaluation of safe and effective candidates to the distribution of shots. According to the roadmap, priority recipients include healthcare workers, civil servants, uniformed personnel, and the vulnerable population. The National Capital Region, Calabarzon, Region 3, Cebu, Davao City, and Cagayan de Oro are considered priority areas.
Magkakaroon pa tayo ng tinatawag nating logistics service support summit. Doon po natin i-discuss ano po yung mga requirements na gagawin po natin. Kasama po doon ang tinatawag nating yung production, shipment, and storage at saka yung tinatawag na yung distribution and deployment.
According to Galvez, there are currently 17 developers from at least 5 countries that are in talks with the government. 10 have a commitment with the Philippines, while 5 are part of the World Health Organization's COVAX facility, which will provide cheap vaccines for low and middle-income countries. United Kingdom's AstraZeneca has the most accessible offer yet, at $5 or around 250 pesos per dose. The vaccine czar also announced that the country already has arrangements with the United States, Pfizer, Moderna, and Novavax. The U.S. vowed to prioritize the Philippines once their candidate vaccines get approval. China's Sinovac, meanwhile, has not yet fully accomplished the Ethics Review Board's requirements, despite receiving endorsement from the country's vaccine experts panel.
Once they comply, mabilis naman po i-expedite yan. And aside from that, while waiting for that, FDA already has started reviewing yung kanilang initial documents para pagdating sa kanila, hindi na rin po matatagalan ang proseso.
The government intends to procure at least 50 million doses for 25 million Filipinos. The inoculation of at least 20% of the population will come from COVAX. The rest will be vaccinated through a multilateral effort. Galvez said the government has enough funds for mass inoculation, including the base 2.4 billion peso vaccine budget and the 25 billion peso standby fund from Bayanihan 2. They also have a backup plan, a loan from the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank.
Malaki po ang credit rating natin at nakapag-prepare na po ang ating mahal na Secretary Dominguez ng possible amount na kayang-kaya po ng ating credit account doon sa World Bank at saka sa na makuha yung yung tatawag nating advanced procurement program para sa mga vaccine po na ito.
Galvez expects the initial supply to arrive in May to June next year. He anticipates the bulk of the supply in the fourth quarter of 2021, if not early 2022. For now, the Health Department urges the public to continue practicing minimum health standards as the waiting game for a safe and effective vaccine continues. The DOH also warned against holding public gatherings, especially that the holidays draw near. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. recommends a nationwide ban on Christmas caroling this year. Galvez says the activity is prone to COVID-19 transmission since it often entails mass gatherings. Citing an international study, he added that the virus could likely spread faster when singing compared when speaking. Galvez says authorities are regulating possible COVID-19 super spreaders such as karaoke and carolings.
Importante dito ang natin is tingnan natin yung kanyang consequence and I believe itong caroling magiging unregulated to boss eh. So pagka once na nag-caroling tayo, it is uncontrolled.
And these are the other big stories today. The health crisis economic damage in the second quarter has turned out to be worse than what was initially thought. Contraction for the April to June period was revised to 16.9%, worse than the initially reported 16.5%, which signaled the country's fall into a recession. That sends 6-month contraction to a deeper 9.3%. Third quarter GDP data will be released tomorrow. Economists hope for signs of recovery from the historic slump in the second quarter. Meralco consumers can expect a lower bill this month on the back of a more stable power supply causing a drop in generation charges. Power rates will drop by 4 centavos to 8 pesos and 51 centavos per kilowatt hour this month. That means households with monthly consumption of around 200 kilowatt hours can expect their bills to be lower by at least 8 pesos. The Philippine Star's Esmeralco has likewise announced that it has restored electric services in areas badly affected by typhoons Quinta and Rolly. Meanwhile, Ulysses intensifies into a tropical storm. As of 4 p.m. today, it was spotted 575 kilometers east of Borongan City in eastern Samar. Pag-asa says it is moving northwestward at 15 kilometers per hour. Ulysses has maximum sustained winds of 65 kilometers per hour, gusts up to 80 kph. No warning signals have been raised so far. We'll take another break, but when we come back, motorcycle taxis will finally hit the road soon, but it's going to be a riding experience. Find out the new rules next. And Disney UK releases a heartwarming Christmas ad which has Filipinos grabbing for some tissue. A sneak peek after the break. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Government has allowed ride-hailing apps to resume operations in an effort to further reopen the economy, but being back on the road comes with requirements both for the riders and the passengers. Gerard De La Peña explains.
Daniel's motorcycle is his bread and butter. He has been working for ride-hailing app Joyride since January. But with the pandemic limiting public transportation, he was compelled to do food deliveries instead, even if it meant a lower take-home pay of 800 pesos compared to the 2,000 pesos he used to get daily as a motorcycle taxi rider.
Ayun, babalik ko ako ng motorcycle taxi. Kasi mas malaki ang kita dun eh. Kulang sa pamilya eh, kulang sa panggastos, lalo na nga nung pandemic.
That's why it's music to Daniel's ears and thousands of other riders that the Interagency Task Force on Emerging Infectious Diseases has re-allowed motorcycle taxi operations.
Napaka-importante po nito dahil alam niyo naman, habang tumatagal, kailangan na talaga nating paandarin ang ating ekonomiya. At ang napaka-critical na factor sa pagpapaandar ng ating ekonomiya ay ang public transport.
But the technical working group on motorcycle taxis has yet to determine the exact date as to when they can get back on the road. The pilot run was cut short when Metro Manila was placed under enhanced community quarantine last March. The TWG said it will first meet with the initial pilot run's participants, Angkas, Joyride, and Move It.
Para i-remind po ulit yung dating na-adapt na security measures that they should observe. At para malaman din kung finally yung listahan ng authorized riders nila. No? Pag-usapan namin kung kailan ito talagang ready na. And again, we'd like to get the assurance from them na yung nakalhad na pamantayan para alawin sila na magpatuloy na yung pilot run, natupad na nila.
Riders should have negative COVID-19 test results. They must also use IATF authorized barriers. Passengers, meanwhile, have to wear their own helmets on top of their usual face masks. Operators should also impose cashless payments.
Ito ay hindi pa po sanay yung mga tao. So that's something that we need to push for our awareness campaign.
Ang Joyride pivoted to a delivery service that's way back in March when the pandemic started. And we have already implemented a cashless transaction in our mobile app.
The pilot run will also happen in Cebu and Cagayan de Oro. It is expected to span 3 to 6 months. The TWG will submit its recommendations to the House Transportation Committee to help in the crafting of guidelines once motorcycle taxis are allowed for good. For News 5, Gerard De La Peña, We Are One News.
Complaints about online transactions ballooned 600% to 14,000 this year. Appearing before House lawmakers, the Trade Department noted that a number of these complaints involved online fraud. It cited the case of a certain AJ Pande who booked more than 10 drivers to make a delivery to the wrong address as a prank. Most complaints also involved pricing violations.
These are the nature of complaints that you will see, the highest of which is violation of the Price Act. The violation of the Price Act would include overpricing, profiteering, or lack of a price tag.
Trade Undersecretary Ruth Castelo said they have only resolved around 1,500 of reported cases, while some complaints have been endorsed to law enforcement agencies like the PNP Anti-Cybercrime Group. The Trade Committee also warned that there are drug dealers supposedly infiltrating online shopping platforms. It's a triple-header Monday in the PBA. Phoenix opened today's games with a 195 victory over Blackwater. The Fuel Masters clawed their way out of a 16-point deficit in the third quarter to notch the season's top spot with a 7-3 win-loss card alongside Ginebra and TNT. Calvin Abueva led Phoenix, flirting with another triple-double, 17 points, 13 rebounds, and 8 assists. Alaska also booked a ticket to the quarterfinals after a grueling overtime victory against NLEX. The Aces escaped with a 122-119 win over the Road Warriors. Maverick and Hanisi top scored for the Aces with 25 points, 12 rebounds. Third quarter is currently underway between Terra Firma Jeep and Barangay Ginebra, who is up 73-62 after a dominating performance in the first half. COVID-19 cases worldwide have breached the 50 million mark as infections surge in the United States and in Europe. The U.S. reported more than 100,000 daily cases in October in the thick of the presidential election campaign. Europe, meanwhile, has become the worst affected region so far, with about 12 million cases. They overtake Latin America. Several European countries have enforced new lockdown measures in hopes of taming the virus and preventing a collapse in their respective healthcare capacities. And prepare some tissues. Disney UK released a Christmas-themed Filipino short film. It begins in the 1940s. It begins in the 1940s, where parol-adorned old houses and a chariot are spotted. A girl receives a Mickey Mouse stuffed toy from her tatay. Fast forward to 2005, the little girl is now a lola in a foreign land, celebrating Christmas with her granddaughter, with whom she makes parols or lanterns, while the Mickey Mouse stuffed toy looks on. Years pass and the granddaughter becomes distant, but more than makes up for it one Christmas by stitching up the tattered Mickey Mouse and making several lanterns to her lola's delight. The film, which has garnered close to 6 million views so far, closes with a simple "From Our Family to Yours" tagline. The project is in support of non-profit organization Make-A-Wish Foundation. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.